This moment, I hadn't anticipated it. And it was like I was almost physically trying to stop the time to say, no, give me a little bit more of it. No, not just now.
Welcome to episode 12 of Execs Who Run, the podcast where we talk about life, leadership, and the miles in between. I'm your host, Jason Hunt. And today's guest has definitely done a few more miles than most. Leautey is a former CFO who decided to run around the world. And no, not in a symbolic way. She actually ran over 30,000 kilometers across 4 continents, solo, pushing a stroller with all her gear. It's one of the wildest stories I've come across, and somehow one of the most practical. Lootie brings a mindset shaped by global leadership roles and applies it, literally, to every step she takes. She talks through how she planned the entire thing like a business project, how she stayed injury-free, and what it really takes to reinvent your life when the world is watching, but also when it isn't. This one's not just about running far, it's about thinking differently. So, let's dive in. Welcome along to the show, Marie. How are we doing today?
Thanks for having me. Yeah, doing great.
We kick this off with the same thing every time, just asking about the last run that you've been on. So tell me about your last little run.
Compared to what I've done, I've not done much running lately. I usually just do little 5-kilometer runs, just I call them maintenance runs. So that was probably last weekend. That was along the coast near where I live. So seaside runs are my favorite.
Yeah, nice. And do you have like a common place that you go running? Like, is it the same little route to soak up the seaside, or you change it up?
I try to vary as much as I can. I like to surprise myself. So sometimes I don't really plan for it. I just go one direction. When I'm too far out, then I return. I like to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, nice. And for the listeners, they're probably picking up some kind of an accent, and it's not a Greek accent. So do you just want to tell us a little bit about where you're from?
Yeah, I'm French, but I've been a nomad my whole life, and I like to carry my French accent with me wherever I go. So I've lived in various regions, including Asia Pacific. So I was living in Singapore many years, all over Europe. I've worked in bits of work in Australia on the West Coast as well. So that was some time ago. So a nomad with a deep, strong French accent.
Oh, it's not too bad. I can understand you, which is a great start. Why did you end up in Greece?
A work assignment. I've been using my career as a way to feed my thirst for nomadism. So the fact that I speak 4 languages, including Greek, does help a lot. So I've found myself in pretty cool places over the years and progressing my career as I was moving around the world as well.
I think you're going to be a brilliant guest for this podcast, just in some of the research that I've done and the way you think about things, and this really being about kind of the intersect of life, leadership and running. And I think that fits really well for you. But I want to take it back to when you really first started running. Tell me a little bit about what you're at, what you're up to at the time, what you were doing, and how you got into running in the first place.
I got into running when I was posted in Greece for a work assignment. And funny enough, I was posted near Athens, near the town of Marathon, the actual town of Marathon, 42 kilometers away from the center of Athens. I was 26 years old. I was a smoker. I used to smoke around about a packet of cigarettes a day. I was slightly overweight. I had drifted away from what I used to be as an teenager and adolescent. I used to be outdoors all the time. But of course, work got in the way, studies and everything. And I found myself working hard. So I was sent from my company. My company was based in Scotland. They sent me to Greece because I spoke Greek to have a short gig as a finance director out there for the local brewery that they had bought. So it was a very exciting time in my career. I was very happy as well to be moving to places I didn't know and to discover a bit more of the world. And I just picked up windsurfing outside of the town of Marathon. And one day the instructor, they used to finish the day by going for a little 5-kilometer run. in the forest near the beach, and they asked me if I wanted to join. So I'm 26, they are twice my age. You can have to go there now, it's done. So I put my sneakers in, all of them, and after less than a kilometer, I had to stop because I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't run. My lungs were on fire. I felt so humiliated and so bad about it. And that was my turning point. From this day on, I haven't smoked a cigarette and I'm about to go out and be able to run with this guy. So the first 5 kilometer loop was my first target. And then it, as you know, it does.
Yeah, wow. There's quite a quick change, right? From nothing and a pack a day to just that cold turkey and I'm going to get into this running. Did being in marathon or near marathon have any influence on you at the time? Like how long was it until you actually ran your first marathon from that point?
It was exactly 9 months after this famous day where I couldn't run 5 kilometers. From this day on, you can imagine just how radically it transformed everything. Is like from this day where I couldn't run in the forest, literally in the days that follow, I decided not to use my car anymore, but to commute everywhere by bicycle. It being Greece is very mountainous. So I had a mountain to cross to go to my job every morning, back every evening. So I was cycling everywhere, up to 70 kilometers a day to go to work and back. I was running every day. I would go to the beach as well on my way back. So if there was wind, there would be windsurfing. If there was no wind, there would be kayaking. So, and this is how running became a part of something daily in my life. But as time moved on and I left Greece for other work assignments, I discovered that running was a fantastic way to discover the places I was based in. If I would be in Russia or in Moscow or St. Pete for 2 or 3 months, every morning I would take a different route and discover the city this way before starting my working hours. So it was just, running was completely a good companion for my nomadic life. It was brilliant.
It's a radical transformation, right? From nothing to just suddenly going, all right, I'm going to be healthy now and this is how I'm going to live my life. Like what was it? I guess, you know, the moment of not being able to run was pretty pivotal, but what kind of person were you to be able to just do that, just flick the switch and make that change?
I think it has to do a lot with the way I live my life. When I was about to finish my studies, I decided to complete them abroad. So I took my 2 suitcases. I was 20 years old, went to Scotland. My English was not really good, but I just went for it anyway. And the moment I left my country and I was abroad, there was this feeling that I could dare doing things and I could take on any challenge because there was no expectations on me for everything I would do. So for instance, a year after I left France with a level of English that was not that good, the year after that, I found myself lecturing law at the university in Scotland in front of hundreds of students and delivering my lectures. And it was fine because I was not home. There was no expectation. If I was to fail, I didn't feel this pressure, but it transformed me in a sort of I felt like I could do anything I wanted to. And then I dropped because working at a university was not what I was aiming for. I wanted to travel the world. Then I just dropped that to work for a company where I had other skills that could be useful for them. And again, letting them know that my life fits in 2 suitcases and I speak some languages, so you can send me wherever. You know, I'll be your little traveler for your international division. And they sure did use me like that. But I felt I could do anything, be in any place. You know, this is the world is your oyster or something. But I had this ability to do that because it was my kick, my adrenaline kick or something. You know, it really fired me. So the thing with running, for me, it was the same principle of saying, okay, right, let's change everything. You can do it. Simple.
You're just like, all right, I'm just going to go and do something now, and this is the thing I want to do. I love it. It seems to me that that's how you kind of just continue doing things, right? Your early career was with, you know, some big multinationals, Coke and Heineken and Mondelez and finance or finance-orientated roles. And then you just do this random shift into essentially more kind of sports management event type? Like you started your own one and you were doing some work in others. What prompted that shift?
What prompted that shift is that I actually discovered after my change of lifestyle, right, when I was in Greece, I went back to Scotland and I discovered triathlon whilst I was in Scotland. My first triathlon was at the Loch Lomond, I remember. It was very cold and everything. But I just found, wow, this is so great. Outdoors, multi-sport, there was everything I liked there. So I came back to Greece to visit my friends and I said, but Greece is the perfect playground for triathlon. And to my surprise, there was no triathlon. There was a triathlon federation that had about 10 or 15 people who had a license, a card to be triathletes. And they organized little event only for these 15 people who had a card. And that was it. So there was no mass events of triathlon. I really wanted to share. So I started organizing amateurish triathlon. And then at the first one, I think I had 50 people come around. Some of them didn't even have goggles or helmets. They were an absolute mess. And then by the second time, we had 100 people. And then by the third time, we had 200 people. And then it just escalated. And I said, okay, well, we need a company for that. I can't be on my own just bringing medals and big numbers in my suitcase. I've got to professionalize this thing. And I found it super interesting because it was like diving in something I didn't know anything about. Back then in Greece, there was no private organizer, either for running or for triathlon or for anything else. The only organizers were like the municipalities or the federation. It was something very institutional. So I broke all that and I introduced private events. And of course, you get, things like more quality. You make it a fun event. You bring in a DJ or, you try to make it a memorable day for people. And that's what I love about it. I created my chance to be able to bring that. It was in accordance with my values, what I knew how to do, or didn't.
Gotcha. I guess you're still following this trajectory of just doing stuff, right? Like giving it a go and doing something different if you find it interesting. What was the biggest learning that you got out of just going and trying something different in the business world where, you were in these massive multinationals beforehand, pretty safe at the end of the day, lots to fall back on. That didn't really exist when you go and start something for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And also in Greece, the environment was quite complicated. It was before the big financial crisis, so things were starting to go south. There was a lot of corruption as well. So from one event that I organized randomly, and then the demand was there, so I wanted to answer this demand, and I wanted to be able to offer more events, more distancing. But of course, when you do that, you need the support from the traffic police to help you block the roads because, you send bicycles on the road. You need the support from your municipality, from the port authority to ensure safety at sea. You need a lot of support. And when you're a foreigner in Greece, back then, even if I speak the language and everything, it's very difficult. And it taught me something that I had never met in my corporate environment. It taught me to really not give up, keep fighting till you get an answer. And it went to the point where I had to lobby at governmental level. I was going to the ministry to have them to propose a law at the parliament that would say that competitions can be organized by non-institutional. I would never have dreamt of going its ministries and trying to make them understand that we needed this in order to open a new economic segment in Greece where people can make money organizing events. And now it's a big business in Greece. We have proper Ironman races, we have proper mountain races and all sort of things. But it wasn't like so when I started. There was nobody. So it taught me the value of doing things. I was not making any money. Actually, all my savings went into that. It was a very difficult economic model to build because you needed the trust of people that you were not overcharging them. If I would charge them 20 euro for a race, they would be outraged because the races they had before were all for free. So I had to, go against the grain and fight for something I knew would be great and not making any money in the process. But to me, this is probably the most valuable thing I've done in my life, yet I didn't make a penny from that. So I think that was a great lesson as well.
Yeah, it's cool. Like it's amazing. And to say that that was where you learned the most is fascinating given what we're about to talk about. But obviously that wasn't cutting the mustard because it probably wasn't paying the bills given you weren't making money from it. So you jumped back into a corporate career, and ultimately that ended up seeing you as a regional CFO based in APAC for the consulting business RGP. What did you learn from that experience starting your own business and doing things in Greece? When you took that into your executive roles, how would you develop? Like, how did that make you a better leader, a better operator?
I felt it made me a more confident person, definitely. And there was this sense that I don't need to be a specialist in something in order to be able to manage it and to bring the business forward. Maybe that's something that was unblocked in me when I set up my own business. And I was not scared anymore. I could stand in front of a prime minister, or I could stand in front of a CEO or anything. I think I gained my confidence as a CFO and as a people's person as well. These 5 years of having my own thing in Greece, I had to rally a lot of people to my cause. I didn't know I could do it before, but then seeing what I had achieved in 5 years, it was a real booster for telling me, that's fine. Any project you had, you'll be able to find a way. Don't you worry, even if you don't know how it works, you'll find your own way. And when you have that in you, then you shine your confidence. People perceive your confidence and they are more able to trust you. That's probably what I brought with me when I wanted to turn my career around and come back to the corporate world, because it's not an easy thing. People don't open the door to you. You're a bit of a loose cannon. That's their perception. Like, but she can leave the corporate world anytime to do her own thing. She's not going on a straight line. It can put people off as well. So you got to show that what you've learned outside of this proper career path or accepted career path can add value to where you're going, whatever my next gig was going to be, working for Spotify or other types of companies. Yeah.
Well, they may have been somewhat right in the fact that, hey, she can leave the corporate world at any time, because, and to be fair, I think you spent about 5 years back in that role and a bit of time as a corporate CFO. But take me to the day that you decided that you were going to leave your job and you're going to run around the world.
It happened. It's very strange. I call it a moment of serendipity. I was actually in Singapore. So I was sitting there, overlooking the Marina Bay at the 30th floor of a big building in my office. And I was on this conference call that lasted for hours. So what I do usually, I've got a little notepad and I take notes, or I doodle. I like to doodle a lot. And I was just drawing things randomly. But when I hang up from the call, like when I hang up the phone and I looked at what I had been drawing, there was this little globe, like the Earth, and there was a little woman running on top of it. And I looked at it and I thought, oh, running around the world. I thought, what a strange idea. Does that exist? Have any people ever done that before, running around the world? The thing was stuck in my mind just looking at this little doodle. So I went on Google, and I think I just keyed, has anyone ever run around the world? I just wanted to know if it was something possible. And turns out, I found out that 6 people had done it, 1 woman and 5 men, including an Australian guy, Tom Dennis. I don't know if you know him. He was the first Australian to have run around the world. So I thought, right, if 1 woman and 5 men have done it, then that means it's possible. So from this point on, that was it. I knew I was going to do it one day. I didn't know how long it takes to prepare for something like that, what you need to prepare to be able to start the journey. But I knew from the moment the idea was formed and then the confirmation that the idea was not crazy in my mind, then that was it. That was all systems go.
Was there a sense of just unknowns at that point where you decided that it wasn't that crazy? You know, had you known that you were going to be running essentially a marathon a day for 2 years, if you'd known that at the time, do you think you still would have gone, oh yeah, this is a great idea?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, it's funny, before I left for my world run, I only gave one interview because I didn't want to blow my trumpet before having done anything. So I had only one interview, and the journalist asked me, what do you expect from this thing? You know, when you come back in 2 years or in 3 years, what would make you happy to say? I said to him, I just want to be able to say that it has surprised me. I want it to be, that's what I'm looking in my nomadic life, in my professional life, and that's also what I was looking for in this world run, to have a different experience of the world that would teach me more, you know, that would surprise me more, connect me with people and places in a different way. So I would not have been put off by the idea. If you had told me from the get-go that I would be running a marathon a day, I would have thought, that's crazy great, you know, that's this kind of thing, rather than put me off.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'll take your word for that one. There's a quote that I want to read out from some of your content, and it's, the only science I know is business management. That is the science I use in order to plan my world run and deliver it throughout. There's no secret. If you use the right methodology, if you are consistent and committed, there is no reason you will fail. And I really like that because, as I referred to at the start, I might steal it because it's perfect for the idea of this podcast, but I want to understand, before we even get into the run itself, you talked about not really knowing what you needed to do to be able to achieve this. What did the planning look like to actually go, all right, I'm going to run around the world. How the hell do I do that?
Well, like you just said at the beginning of the quote, the only science I know is business management. And I was a CFO at the time. So what do I do? And I'm not kidding. This is exactly how it went. I opened an Excel file and I started opening different tabs. So there was one which was global planning. So I just put thoughts randomly on there. You know, I may have put safety, where to go, where to sleep, where to eat. How many pair of socks do I need? How many, you know, shorts? How many, what item of clothing do I need? Shoes, equipment, how do I transport my gear? So I started on the global planning sheet. It was like a mad brainstorming as I kept feeding every day with anything. It could be the morning I wake up with suddenly an idea and I put it on. And then, of course, quickly, I was able to organize all these random words and ideas into 3 big axes. So there was logistical, there was physical, and there was financial. So I ended up with 3 fives, and everything fitted in there. And those 3 things were equally challenging for me. I needed these 3 blocks to be somewhat in the green for me to decide that I was ready to start the world run. So we can go into detail, but just to give you an idea, for me, logistic embodied everything from how to transport my gear, what would be my route across the continents, how many kilometers can I bear every day and be healthy doing it day after day for like 2.5 years. So that's sort of all the logistics. And then, like, for instance, when I change season, you know, if it's winter in New York, and then by the time I go to South America, it's summer, you know, I need different set of clothes, I need, you know, different equipment. How do I organize all that? Physical was, what is my comfortable volume of running? How do I learn everything I can about my body? Because I'm not going to have anybody with me. I'm going to be solo, self-supported. So if I have any problem, I have to be able to understand it and to sort it out myself. So there was a lot of work there done on understanding my biomechanics, studying my body, studying the anatomy, understanding how every joint in my body works. And it took a lot of work to get there, you know, because if all I was able to say was, oh, today I've got pain in my ankle, I can't sort it out. Is it the bone that's causing a pain? Is it a tendon that's causing a pain? I need to understand that in order to fix it. Otherwise, I'm useless and I'm going to run into an injury. So the physical aspect was a lot of things. It was not just getting myself ready to run the volume. There was also a lot of work on the body itself. And financial, of course, because if I launch for 2 or 3 years, then I need to have the resources for it as well. So this is another example in my life where I was ready to put all my savings on the line, do something that will not generate much income or money, but which I knew would be worthwhile. And indeed, I ended up being self-financed, because in this kind of endeavors, it's extremely difficult to actually find a sponsor. I was not an Olympic athlete. I was not a champion of anything. I was a CFO who enjoyed running a marathon a year or a triathlon a year. That's all I had on my sports resume. So who would want to sponsor me for something I could not guarantee them I would achieve it, or even so. So these 3 blocks were how I started it. And it's very much how you do in business. When you have a project in front of you, you find out what you need to get. You need to get your team ready. You need to get a budget. So you need to plan how you're going to deliver it. That's exactly the same thing, That's all I knew how to do.
A lot of planning, clearly, that then had to go into it. I'm sure there's some of those sponsors out there now looking and going, damn, maybe we should have. I want to understand just the concept of what running around the globe looks like in terms of what it actually is. So how far it is, where you have to run, what you have to run, like what actually constitutes an official circumnavigation of the globe?
Yeah, it was a question very early on. And actually, when I did my search on Google that day, I asked Google, has anyone ever done it? I stumbled upon the WRA, which is the World Runners Association. And actually, some of its founding members are actually in Australia. The president is Phil Essan. He's now based in Tasmania, I think. And Tom Dennis, the other Australian world runner, is a part of it. What they've done is something which for me was pivotal in the way I organize my logistics, because what it gave me the 10 rules that I had to abide to. I was pretty free in how I would choose my route. But they have these 10 rules, because if you look at the planet Earth, it's actually 70% water. So the circumference of planet Earth is actually 40,000 kilometers, but there is no way that you can just circumnavigate and run 40,000 kilometers. You will encounter some bodies of water at some point. So the first guy who ran around the world, what he did was he actually calculated, if you follow one line around the world, at which point do you cross the most Earth? And actually the answer to that was, there was a latitude where if you cross this one, then you have 26,232 kilometers on firm land. So that's how this number came about, just short of 30,000 kilometers. So that's the minimum distance you have to run. In order to have a world run, every continent you cross has to be crossed from one ocean to another. Like for instance, Australia, well, if I leave from Perth, I have one ocean at my back and arrive in Sydney in front of another one. So every continent has to be crossed from side to side, and also in a continuous line. So whenever I stop running in the evening to settle for the night, that's the exact point I have to restart the next day in order to have a continuous run across the continents. It also has to be in a continuous sense. So if I pick east to west or west to east, whatever I choose, I've got to stick to it. A minimum of 4 continents have to be crossed in their entirety. So all in all, there are 10 rules. And for me, these rules were guides. I never felt constrained by it. They helped me build my plan to build a legitimate route. And I liked the fact that it is not a self-declaratory thing. I just don't go around saying, I've been running around the world. No, this world run has been ratified and validated, and I followed the rules, and also it gives it more credit and more legitimacy in a sense. So yeah, that's these rules. That's, for me, they were extremely useful, and I'm glad they exist, because also for other people, it's sort of a blueprint on how to build your own journey in a way.
And so which continents did you decide, and in which direction did you decide to do your run? Well,
I was going on a west to east direction. Of course, we're going to touch on that, I'm sure, later. My beautiful plan was completely shattered 3 months into my running because COVID went in my way. That's another story. But the plan was, I thought it would be pretty cool to run on all 6 populated continents. I'm not counting Antarctica for obvious reasons, and cross 4 in entirety. So my plan was to cross Europe entirely, then do a little bit in Asia, but not as a full continent crossing, then cross in its entirety Australia, Oceania, with a bit of running in New Zealand, then cross in its entirety North America, South America, and come back to Europe via a little bit of running on the African continent, and crossing Gibraltar to come back to Europe. So that was the plan. And of course, because of COVID, I had to cut short all the nice bits and keep to what was essential. So I ended up running Europe, Oceania, North America, South America. That's my four continents.
What did you do with COVID? How? That's ridiculous. So when did COVID happen in relative terms to where you were at the time?
I was 3 months in and everything was going so perfectly. I was almost annoyed that I was running every stage exactly as in my Excel spreadsheet. And I was like, well, something's got to happen at some point. I can't follow the lines of an Excel for 2 years. I was 3 months in. Everything was going perfect. And I had already crossed the coast of, if you have an idea of Europe, the coast of Portugal, Spain, France, and I was inside Italy, I was deep in it. And of course, Italy in Europe is the first country that actually declared a full lockdown. So I was literally ejected from the country overnight because suddenly the tourist industry froze. So I ended up at my parents' place in Paris. Of course, you can imagine, without any belonging other than my 10-kilo bag of equipment full of shorts and T-shirts. And I had nothing because I had sold everything for this world run. So I had nothing to get back to. I didn't have a house. I didn't have furniture. I didn't have anything, just my computer and my bag. So during this lockdown, I tried to do whatever I can to keep my physical shape because I wanted to keep that going. Of course, it was complicated because technically you are not allowed outside. So I found a job as a volunteer. I was distributing meals to the homeless in the street of Paris. And so I had an authorization to be outside, and I was doing it, you must have guessed it, running. So I was using my stroller, which I was using the World Run to move my belonging. I was using that to fill it with all the meals and run through Paris all day long, getting meals right and left. So to me, that was brilliant. I was useful. I had a purpose, and I was keeping in shape. So I thought, it doesn't matter how long this lockdown is going to last. As soon as it reopens, I'm ready to go. And so the first lockdown in Europe for us lasted 3 months. So after these 3 months, I was still in great shape, and I started exactly where I left it in Italy. But the trick was, Europe was open, but Oceania was closed, Asia was closed, North America and South America were closed. And I thought, well, what am I going to do? Because if I reach my destination, if I reach Istanbul, I have nowhere to go. And then how many years or how am I going to wait? So I thought, okay, then I'm going to change my plan. Instead of going in a straight line to Istanbul, I'm just going to go around Europe and see as much of Europe as I can. So I crossed the Balkans, I crossed France, I crossed everything I could. My plan for Europe was 6 months or 7 months, 7,000 kilometers from Portugal to Istanbul. It ended up being a year and a half, 15,000 kilometers. And that was just my first continent.
It was going really well then to start with.
Yeah.
God.
And it was terrible because by the time I remember reaching what I thought would be a big milestone, when I reached the number 10,000 kilometers, it was like, when I was in my planning stage, I was, wow, when I will reach 10,000, I will feel I'm so much. I was still on the first continent. I was still a few thousand kilometers away from my start. I hadn't moved very far. And here I am celebrating my 10,000 and then 15,000 kilometers, still on the same old continent. The WRA gave me an exemption because it was clear that Australia was going to keep their border closed for so long. And so the WRA said to me, look, it's exceptional circumstances. You can go around, do the other continents. North America was open, South America. And whenever Australia opens, and that's the reason why I finished with Australia, as opposed to finishing back in Europe. So anyway, so that was COVID. But again, the key is if you know you're going to get there and you still want it very bad, February, it doesn't matter. Delays don't matter. Whatever hurdle, there is always a way, like in business, there's always a way to get there.
All right. So we get to Istanbul and then we're getting in a plane. Where are we going next?
We are going to North America because I already had a visa for the US, like a 10 years visa. So I didn't need, it would have been very difficult if I didn't have a visa. I would have all these administrative things blocking me. But because I had it and the US had just opened their borders after a year and a half, then I was able to go there. So I flew to Seattle and I ran all the way to New York City. So that was 5,500 kilometers of running or something like that, crossing the big Midwest, Montana, North Dakota, the flat plains. And it was, of course, during the heat waves and the fires and everything, but it was amazing.
Did you have many people joining you on any of these runs? Like, did people start to know that this was happening? How were you kind of engaging with the communities that you were running through? What did all that look like?
Yeah, it was actually quite interesting because it turned out that it's when I'm running in the most isolated places that I stand out the most. If you see me running in Europe, because you have to picture this, I'm pushing a stroller, like a baby stroller, and instead of a baby, there is my bag of equipment. So when I'm running in very densely populated places, people don't see anything in me. They just think, well, that's just a mom running around, doing a jog with a baby. However, so throughout Europe, it was more or less like that. I never really stood out. But suddenly, when I started the US crossing, I found myself in the middle of completely deserted places where the sight of a jogger is really something unusual. In the middle of Montana, where, the next town is maybe 100-something kilometers away from where I am. It's definitely, so it actually attracts the right kind of people because it's people who want to help the mother and her baby running in the middle of nowhere through the heat wave. So a lot of people stopping by, asking me if I was okay, if I had enough food for me and the baby, if I had enough water, if I had somewhere to sleep tonight. And it was, the moment I started crossing the US, my daily blog started to resemble like a gallery of all sorts of people of Montana and Dakota and everything because I was meeting people every day, so many, and they all wanted to help. And so it gave another dimension to the journey where in Europe I was more invisible because of the nature of how there are people everywhere. And I noticed that as well, mostly in the US, but also in Australia. Yeah, when you cross the Nullarbor, of course, you do stand out. It was fantastic in terms of how it connected me so easily to people.
Yeah, you're running through parts of Australia where you and miners are the only people that are close to anything. So I can imagine you would have stood out. That's pretty cool, though. I think that I guess you would have looked quite strange, particularly given you're pushing a stroller around, but people actually wanting to help. And did you get many runners joining you? Like, did people start to learn about it then and have some people join you?
Sometimes, and it happened mainly in the US because I completely by random. I don't know if you've ever heard of the Badwater Marathon.
No.
It's one of the most difficult marathons in the world. It starts in the US below sea level in the desert, and it ends up on the highest mountain there. So the differential is quite big. And this Badwater Marathon is where people like the names Dean Karmazis and all these runners. It was really a feat of endurance. It's a 100-miler. It's very tough. Anyway, completely by random, on the first week of running in the US, I met this girl. She's on her bike, and she was the medical director of this race. She had won the race herself. She's like an amazing runner, well known in the US. And suddenly she connects me to her network. She's like, oh, when you reach Spokane, there is this running club and this, that. So I started having some people who heard about my journey from word of mouth. So I had a few people, but mostly when I was approaching proper towns throughout Montana and Dakota. There was nothing. But suddenly I approached Minneapolis and I had a group of runners welcoming me and running with me into the city, and the same in New York and the same in Washington. So it just word of mouth and running clubs. And so it was quite nice for me to be introduced to this network as well. So it was really good.
That's very cool. So after North America, South America was next. And I guess you would have encountered it a little bit in the States, but you don't need to be a geography expert to realize that crossing South America, you have to go over some pretty large mountains. You probably actually would have in Europe as well. You probably have to get through the Alps in some way. How the hell did you go about getting over some of the most ridiculous mountains that there are and pushing a stroller as well?
I always knew that crossing the Andes would be by far the most challenging. Also, I knew from Australian runner Tom Dennis that you are not allowed to run on the main road to cross the Andes. You have to go off-road. So it's trail running. Not only it's trail running, but you literally go from Stila Vale in Valparaiso on the coast, and within a few hundred kilometers, you are running at 4,000 meters of altitude. So I knew that it would be extremely challenging and I would need help to carry my equipment. So I was already 2 years into my running by the time I crossed the Andes. And by sheer luck, one of my friends, James, decides to accompany me throughout the crossing. So he was on this bicycle, but he was also driving a minivan. And that meant that at least for this crossing of the Andes, I wouldn't be pushing my stroller, because my stroller was actually 30 kilos. People don't realize I was not just running a marathon a day. I was running a marathon a day pushing a 30-kilo stroller. So of course I was really relieved not to have to push it through this mountain, which I was anticipating with such excitement, really, to think that only because I had this idea to run around the world, I will find myself alone with my running shoes in the middle of the Andes, for me, the most mythical mountain in the world, maybe after the Himalayas. But for me, it was something almost mythical. And people asked me if it was hard to run at this altitude and to run to this altitude. And I said, no, I mean, the excitement counterbalances it so much. And when you reach this 4,000-meter point and you see the Argentinian flag on one side and the Chilean flag on the other side, this is my border crossing. I've never crossed a border in such conditions at such altitude. It's so crazy to be there. I don't have any memory of pain or suffering. I have memory of just incredible joy carrying me through and being in places and you're like, thank God for this crazy idea I had. I mean, this is nobody else. Who else lived through that in their lifetime? It's just incredible.
It's amazing I'm sitting here with a massive big grin on my face the whole time, because the passion and the joy that you kind of exude talking about this is infectious, even over a call like this. And I guess the question that people doing these crazy ultra events get asked, and I'm going to ask it to you, but I sense it's not very relevant, but was there ever a point where you wanted to give up?
It's funny because I get asked the question a lot. And I remember during my world run, a journalist asked me a question, and I kept thinking about it as I was running. And I remember thinking, but it doesn't even make sense. What does that mean to give up? What do? I just sit by the side of the road with my stroller and I said, I've given up? It's not an event. It's my life. It's my way of life for 2 years. Okay, it is a run around the world, but it is a way of life that I've chosen for two years and a half. So giving up, it was not a race. It's not like, I tear off my bib number and that's it. There was no sense of, for instance, if you give up, then you go back home. I didn't even have a home. So my home was the road. There was never a sense. I couldn't even understand what giving up would mean. Or put it into perspective, yes, if I had been injured, but even if I had been injured, I think I would have just waited for it to pass, to heal and start again. I knew that even an injury couldn't take me away from my goal. this is just the mindset I started with. And there was never any sense that giving up was something that could happen or that I could ever consider.
It's incredible, but it makes sense, right? I guess you had this mindset that it was, well, this is just my life now, right? Like, this is what I'm doing. I've just got to figure out how to continue doing it, right? It's not this thing that's separate to me. It's just, this is me right now. I gotta keep going, which is awesome. Something you said in there that I just want to pick up on. You said, if I had been injured or whatnot, and you say that in a way where you weren't injured?
Yeah, actually, there is a whole lot of numbers that can appear to be impressive on this wild run, like number of kilometers, number of shoes, number of continents, this, that, and the other. The one number that I'm actually very proud of is zero injury. And that is, to me, that is the validation that my preparation was right and that I did it somehow with good intelligence. And there was an important part of my preparation. I touched on it earlier, where I told you that I really studied my body. I studied anatomy. I studied biomechanics. I tried to understand everything I could about my body, how my body reacts. When I get tired by high volume, what does my body do to counterbalance the effect of high volume? Maybe I disengage some muscle and I put more pressure on my joints, and that's a danger, because then, if you put more pressure on your joints and you don't use your muscle the way they should work, then you are in trouble, because there's going to be problem with your knees or your ankle or your back. So I tried to understand everything. I worked very hard on proprioception. I reprogrammed the way my foot lands as well, to land on the ball on the foot where it's supposed to be. I worked very hard, and I installed something which became a daily routine. I call it my body scan. So as I set out to run every morning, usually within the first 10 minutes, I run through one in full. So it starts from my toes, and it goes all the way up to the base of my head, to my neck. And it goes like so. It's proprioception. It's understanding what part of the body I'm mentally scanning. And I go, how are my toes? Is there any pain? Is there anything that rubs, that chaps? Are they okay? Yeah, okay, let's move on to the sole of the foot. And you do every part trying to understand. And it's actually quite the opposite of what most people in the running world do, which is, no pain, no gain. You have to suffer a little bit in order to get your great result. For me, it was quite the opposite. I didn't want to suffer, because I was going to be my way of life for 2 years. If I was in pain every day, that would be awful. That would almost spoil the experience. So I reacted to every signal I perceived. And just like in business, to me, it was, you have to understand that I treated my body, every part of my body, like my team. And if you are at work engaged in a very ambitious project, and you have a team with you, your team enables you to reach your goal. So the last thing you want is people giving up because they are in a burnout, or, they can't cope with what you're asking them to do. You want the best of them because they are your team. They are very good. That's what you picked them. That's the reason why you picked them. And you want them to give you their best, but you don't want to damage them. So you take care of them. And that's how you do in business. And that's the same way I was doing with my legs, my feet, and everything. And so whenever there was a signal that something was wrong, or that could potentially be wrong, then you do like you do at work. You reallocate. Or maybe I'm doing too much asphalt. I need to go more on off-road running. Maybe there was too much elevation. Let's reroute my plan. Maybe I don't need to cross all these hills. Maybe I'll do a longer route. It will take me 2 or 3 more days, but I won't have to deal with steep uphills that are currently causing problem to my ankle or something. There is always something that you can think of doing to reallocate a load if you understand what is causing your problem. So it's actually a lot of work. And during my running, like I say, I never got bored because I had so many things in my head. I was maintaining my team in good condition, healthy. Maybe I need to take more breaks. Maybe there are always things you can do to address your problem. But if you knowingly ignore it, I don't see that there can be a good outcome, actually not in the long run. And my thing was I had to be healthy for two years and a half. So I couldn't afford to get injured.
I think every single runner listening to you right now hates you. The fact that you managed to get through 2.5 years of running without being injured. But it's amazing because
actually, I have to say that I actually had one injury, but it's actually very interesting. You know, like I said, I was pushing this stroller, right? So every time I'm running my marathon, throughout the run, I'm grabbing the handlebar and pushing it, and grabbing and pushing. And it's a load of 30 kilos, and it's quite a lot. So my fingers were grabbing, releasing. And actually, the only part of my body that was not part of my body scan, and that was not part of my anatomy studying that I'd done before, were my arms and my hands. And the only injury I end up having is on my fingers, because I completely ignored it. I didn't even think about it. And I ended up, after the World Run, I had to add an operation on my fingers because I had completely damaged the tendons of one of the fingers, 2 of them. And I didn't even see it. And of course, when it started hurting, it was too late. I had done too much damage to these tendons. So to me, that's a very interesting point that this happened this way.
It is, because you did all of this prep, you figured out everything else, and that was perfect, right? And there's some amazing analogy here somewhere, right? Like there's always something you miss. Something can always go wrong.
Exactly.
Through, like, you are now this super knowledgeable person on running and on anatomy, and yes, it was very focused on you and how you work, and you know, you're not a biomechanist or a physiotherapist, and you know, you're not treating lots of people. You know you really well, but I think when you start to understand you really well, it helps with the things that can help other people. So I want to hear if there's one thing that you took from, whether it was all of your research beforehand or obviously the experience of going through the run. What's the one thing that you would give as advice to people, particularly I think around injury prevention, because that's probably something that pretty much every single runner will deal with at some point in their running career. And you know, you can't prevent everything, but is there something that you would take as the main thing you would think about?
To me, the main takeaway of this World Run, in terms of not my journey, but in terms of the sports element, the performance element, if you had told me, as I was standing on the start line of this journey, right, Lootie, you're going to run for 2 years and a half, a marathon a day, 6 days a week. Sorry, I had a rest day every week. And you're going to be consistent throughout these 2 years and a half. Your pace is not going to drop. And you're going to run all your marathon an average of 4 hours and a half. You're going to have to keep this consistency. If that had been my goal, from the get-go, I would have told you, no, it's impossible. I'm not going to be able to. This can't be my goal, because then it would be a pressure on my mind, and I can't guarantee that I will be running with such consistency. No. Now, I had no pressure on time, on performance, and yet this is what I've achieved. And I call this like almost accidental performance. Of course, it's not accidental. It's because everything you put in place gets you there. The thing I think is the moment you disconnect yourself from numbers, you allow yourself to find the natural way for you to get there. And this is the best way to achieve performance. When I look at all these amateur athletes being slave to their watch and their GPS and their numbers, and there is a pressure as well of putting it on Strava or Garmin and sharing, and you do not realize how much damage it does to you. This connection, this obsession with numbers. I am pretty sure that most people, even those who have very ambitious targets, like running a marathon in less than 3 hours, this, that, and the other, they would achieve the same thing in a much better condition if they didn't rely on numbers all the time. I am sure of that. That's my takeaway from it, because I could never have dreamt of having run the way I've run throughout these 2 years and a half, if that had been my goal.
I think there's a couple of things there that are so true. The first is, you don't actually know what you're capable of until you go and do it. You know, I've done a few things in my kind of running career as well where, you know, I've sat there, chatted with my coach, chatted with my physio, you know, chatted with kind of team around me and gone, like, am I going to be able to do this? Like, is this a good idea? And you go and do it and it's way easier than you expect it to be, or you perform far better than you ever anticipated. And I think you put this mental block on yourself before your body does, right? Like your body is capable of ridiculous things, but your mind is usually the thing that gets in the way. And I think that ties into the numbers and the obsession of that a lot as well, right? Like you think that there's this thing that you have to follow because, you know, it's a round number, or it's what other people are going to find impressive, or like whatever crazy thing it is, and that's why this number exists. Just go and try, right? Like, and that's not to say don't ever have goals and focuses and all this kind of stuff, but I think when they become the obsession, that's when they become dangerous.
Yeah. And there is something I'd like to add to this, and to me that's also a very important thing, is how do you get your feedback from your run? Ask yourself why are you running? You know, if you're in the running community and you speak with people and, you know, you keep listening to what happened after they cross the finish line of a race, and they'll be like, yeah, no, it was not a good run for me because kilometer such and such, I started to drop my pace, and then I knew I was behind. I knew I wouldn't reach my target, and then such and such. And it's all, they are getting their feedback from number even during the run, not just after the run, but during the run, they are getting a feedback on whether they are doing well or not. Now, move back to my journey of running around the world. I knew why I was running. I was running to go on this extraordinary journey, get a unique experience of the world, and discover the world differently. So my feedback was never connected to any number other than the progress I had made during the day, 40 kilometers or so on average. And so I had a good run every day because every day it ticked all the boxes. Yes, I was on this fantastic adventure. Yes, I had a new exceptional sensorial experience of the world that day. I saw kangaroos. I ran with the noise of the parrots flying above my head. All this is positive feedback that tells me, yes, you're having a fantastic run. You're having such a great time. So, and you know how it's funny because all these runners say, yeah, it's all in the mind, but they don't understand what it is. It's in the mind that give yourself a positive reward, positive feedback, and you'll run even better the next day. But give yourself constantly feedback that is tied to number, and therefore that is bound to be, it can't be positive every day. You're going to run less fast or faster. It's going to change. So you inflict that upon yourself to receive negative feedback on your runs, where it's supposed to be your pleasure. It's supposed to be your hobby. It's supposed to be what makes you feel better. So there is real value in disconnecting your feedback and your reason from running from number.
That's so powerful. I'm definitely going to take that as a wee monologue snippet on social media and try and get some content out there that is more helpful than potentially harmful, as a lot of the number focused stuff might be. Okay, I want to catch back up to your journey as we kind of work to the end of our conversation. So we've made it through the Andes, we've made it across South America, and Australia is the last place that you are going to run across, although I think you did do a little bit in New Zealand as well, which is great given that's my home country. But let's talk about Australia. That's where I am now, and Sydney, where you ultimately finished. Tell me about the kind of highlight of your Australian journey.
Oh, the highlight, without any doubt, was crossing the Nullarbor. Yeah, because it was so exceptional, running in this mostly deserted place. It's 1,200 kilometers of running where you only see a roadhouse every 150 or 200 kilometers. So you're running in this amazing place and seeing nature. And I remember before people telling me, oh, you're going to get bored running on this road. And actually, I never got bored. It's not desert in the sense that there is always a little bit of vegetation, there is wildlife, there is things happening, and it's, to me, it's being a European, it's very exotic. And this Australian run was very peculiar because I knew this was my last continent. And I knew that unlike the other continent where reaching New York City or reaching Buenos Aires was always a sign that I've achieved one more milestone on this journey, ultimately, unfortunately, reaching Sydney would mean the end of my extraordinary adventure. And it was a mixture of a joy in a way and a terrible sadness that this best chapter of my life was going to end soon. So it was a real mix of emotion, and I felt it throughout the continent crossing. Of course, I tried to bring myself back in the present, saying, you don't think about Sydney. You are running it now. You are still experiencing it. But yeah, it would come back in waves saying, do I really want this journey to be over ever? And the answer was no. I mean, of course, my pockets were empty. I didn't have any more money at the end of the journey. But I'm pretty sure that if my bank account was still full, I could have kept running just because I enjoyed it so much. I would have just, kept running on other continents, another route, but everything has an end. And anyway, I had to move on to other things. But yeah, this Australian continent was a mix of things. It was a very exotic place for me to run. It was beautiful. And there was a sense that, Sydney would be forever my little place in my heart, where I always remember seeing the Opera House, and it was like there was fireworks inside my body everywhere. It was just the intensity of the emotions were on a scale that I've never experienced before. It was crazy.
You touched on it a little bit there, but what was going through your mind? So you run down the streets of Sydney, finishing at the Sydney Opera House, probably one of the most picturesque places you could finish a run if you thought about it. And amazing that, hundreds if not thousands of people run past that every day just around Sydney and almost think nothing of it. But what was going through your head? Because the melting pot of emotions and the scale of every single different emotion that was going through your head would have just been probably confusing to some extent, right?
Confusing to the point where I think because all these emotions were just too strong at the end, I almost dissociated. I don't know if you've ever had this feeling of dissociating yourself. It's like I could see myself running from above almost because I had to. It was just too strong to handle. You had to realize that I was supposed to finish this world run. If you had with circumnavigation, I should have finished where I started. So in my home country, in Europe. And I ended up finishing this world run, the furthest possible place away from my home in Sydney. My parents had traveled all the way to Australia for the first time in their life to be there on the finish line so that I would finish with people I know. The French embassy had organized to inform some French residents in Sydney to accompany me to be there. And to be fair, there was not many people on my finish line. There were probably about 30, 50 people there waving little French flags. But to me, it was almost crazy to think that there would be anyone at all waiting for me and celebrating with me the end of the journey. So there was this immense gratitude that something was organized, that I wouldn't be alone saying, oh, that's it, that's finished. And there was this sense that in the weeks that led to the arrival in Sydney, I often projected myself, like, oh, what are you going to do in the months after the world run is finished, So, there was a number of things I wanted to do and I was looking forward to it. One thing that I had never actually projected because I didn't think about it was what happened the moment you think, oh, in 3 strides, I will press my GPS button and that's it. I'm not running around the world. I was running around the world and everything is in the past tense from this point on. And this moment, I hadn't anticipated it. And it was like I was almost physically trying to stop the time to say, no, give me a little bit more of it. No, not just now. If I could have, maybe I would have run around the botanical gardens a few times to have a little bit more time on this journey. There was the sentiment that it was too late. I hadn't anticipated it and it was just going to end just like that.
Wow.
It was very brutal in a way. because like you say, it was not a race. It was 2.5 years of my life. And it was extremely intense, extremely powerful. Even thinking about it now, I've got goosebumps.
Yeah, it's very cool. It is interesting to 825 days, and that never crossed your mind until it was kind of too late. But I think what that shows me, and has kind of been picked up through this conversation as well, is just how present you must have been the whole time, and you were just there to enjoy the journey, which I think is really incredible, because what you were doing was obviously an incredible thing. And I think you're maybe only the 7th person to officially do it, 2nd female, fastest female. It's not something that many people do, so it's pretty extraordinary from that point of view. But you were just enjoying it. None of that really mattered, right? It was just you running.
Yeah, I actually think, and I had conversation with some other of these 7 world runners that we are, and I think we all understand the same thing, that there are a lot more people who are able to do what we have done, physically, given the right mindset. A lot of us can do that. Of course, it's a long journey. Of course, it's difficult to find the right time in your life to do this kind of thing. Most people, they have busy life with their children, with their work. It's difficult to set aside 2 or 3 years of your life to do this kind of endeavor. And I think that's a block for most people more than the physical endeavor. And also, it's not something that is spoken about a lot. It's very niche. And even on my journey, when I was saying I'm running around the world, some people were dumbfounded. They were like, what, is there such a thing? So it's not something that will cross people's minds. So that's probably the reason why more people have been to the moon than people have run around the world. But I think I don't think of myself as somebody extraordinary. The only thing extraordinary about me during this journey was this incredible desire to do it and to enjoy it. And that's the only thing that's extraordinary. But physically, I'm like anyone else. I really believe so. Yeah.
And I think that part is extraordinary, because as I said, like the passion that exudes from you talking about it is real, and it's this kind of visceral thing that I'm feeling speaking to you, and we're not even in the same room. And I think that's very, very special. And I think more people that run, a lot of people run for different reasons, but if more people could just enjoy running to even a small extent to the amount that you do, then we'd be in a good place. I want to talk about what you're up to now, because you finished and went through that kind of crazy moment 2.5 years ago now, almost 3 years ago now. What have you been doing since?
Yeah, so after the World Run is an interesting time also in my life. And again, there is no little guide of how to plan your after journey time. What I wanted to do is I wanted to find a way in the years that followed to keep it alive, not only keep it alive, but to share as much of it as I could. And for me, there was an important part, which was to give back to the corporate world. I've always loved working. I mean, my career was my most precious alive throughout my nomadic existence. It was what allowed me to travel the world and to feed this appetite as well. And it's like we said during the conversation, it's what I've learned in business management that allowed me to plan my World Run so well and to deliver, to execute so well. So I developed a kind of conference. Of course, I adapt it to companies, but whatever they want to hear about, whatever their goal is, but where I touch back again on basic business principles and what part of that science of business management is essential in the end, because that's the essence of what I've done with my World Run. And so there is that. Also, I spent a lot of months writing my book. And I wrote it twice. I wrote it once in French, and then I started again and I wrote it in English. So my book is coming out on the 15th of July this year. So it's in a few weeks' time, and it's called Lootie's World Run. So it was important as well to be able to put it down on paper, not just for me, but I remembered that when I started my preparation, one important part was reading the books written by the 6 people who have been there before me. Yeah. And these books, I'm not kidding, I read them so much. The pages were literally falling off the book because I know them by heart. And for me, it was essential because their experience was also what cultivated my passion, even fueled it further, and also helped normalize what I was doing. Because when you read their books, it's amazing. You don't feel they are superhuman or anything. Running a marathon a day is what they do. So, they are not talking about it at every turn of the page. What actually they tell you is the incredible journey. So I wanted to leave that legacy as well. If it can help someone else go on their own journey, then, I'll be more than happy. So writing was very, very important. So I've done all this. I've done the book in French, the book in English. I've done the conferences. So now I'm at a point in my career where I need to start something new. So that's my new chapter is starting now.
Amazing. Is it going to involve more running? Are there any other crazy running adventures in your future?
It's actually quite funny because my adventures now are more around sailing. So probably a sail around the world. One day we know. It's not in the plan, but I'm enjoying a variety of things now, not just running, but I do cycle a lot. I swim, I sail, I enjoy sailing. So maybe different things, who knows?
Maybe you could become the first person to both run and sail around the world. That would be a pretty epic story.
Who knows? Anything is possible. It depends what my mind is set up on, really. Yeah.
Amazing. All right, we're coming near the end, and the one thing I get, we've got lots of interesting tidbits from you throughout this podcast, but one thing I get from everyone to finishing off is 3 pieces of advice. So we get your top piece of advice for life, your top piece of advice for leadership, and of course, your top piece of advice for running.
Okay, my top piece of advice for life, I hope it doesn't sound too, is actually to really take the time to find out what fires you. I think we all have something in us, and it may stem from childhood or from any experience we've had in life, but I'm sure we all have something that fires us. And find a way to keep that thing ignited in what you're doing at work, in the way you live. If I hadn't found this, I told you that my little drawing of the world and the little woman running around, it comes from childhood. It was this little cartoon character called Mafalda. She was a little 7-year-old girl in a cartoon, always carrying a globe in her hand. And I'd reversed it in my cartoon as an adult to make it run around the world. So whether it comes from childhood, whether it comes from anything, try to find it and think how you can embed it in your life. And that's the best way to live your best life. That's what I understand in my life, at least. Mm-hmm. In leadership, my best piece of advice would be, if you know your team members and if you know who you're working with, you will be a better leader, because you alone are nothing without the people who enable you to get to where you are. And if you treat your teams as I treated my body, you will be a great leader. For running, my piece of advice would be, when men were hunter-gatherers, they had no gadgets. And the species survived because they did it in a healthy way, I suppose. So if you strip out all the things that you don't need, you will find your natural way of running, and you will be much happier and healthier for it.
I like it. Garmin probably doesn't like you saying that, but I think it's a sage piece of advice. Maybe what I do sometimes is I still wear my Garmin, but I put it on the watch face, so I just know what the time is, and I'm not looking at any other numbers as I'm running. So there we go, Garmin will keep you happy at the same time.
Well, I actually recorded all my world run with Garmin, and it's still available on Garmin as well. I did have my 2 Garmin devices, but I was not looking at speed or anything. Like you said, just either time or number of kilometers run. That's all I would see. I would not see any other numbers.
Yeah.
Still need Garmin.
Still need Garmin. Amazing. Well, this has been an awesome conversation. Thank you for making the time. Honestly, an incredible story that you've got. We only really touched on small parts of it, right? I'm sure we could probably have spoken for hours. I'm sure your book has a deeper insight, so people will be keen to have a read. I think there's a copy on the way for me to have a read as well, so I'm looking forward to diving into that. But yeah, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on and sharing some of your story today.
Well, thank you, Jason, for having me. And also I want to say to whoever is listening to this podcast, I'm very approachable. I've got my website, I've got my social media, Facebook or Insta. I always make a point to reply to everything. If anybody has a question or even wants to have a chat about running, about your project, about anything, just don't hesitate. I love sharing, as you've seen, about this and what I've learned. I don't know everything. I know at least about me, but if that can help you, just don't hesitate and just get in touch with me. I'll be more than happy to have a chat with whoever wants.
Awesome. That is a brilliant offer. We will link as many things as we can in the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. Maybe the next person who's planning on running the world marathons listening to this and has been inspired and needs to learn more. So yeah, again, thank you.
And that is a wrap on episode 12. Thank you very much for listening. Lootie's story is one that's going to stick with me for a long time because it reminds me that the most ambitious goals often start with a simple decision to try, to move, and to keep going. As always, if you've got feedback, ideas, or guests you'd like to hear from, or if you want to come on the show yourself, please reach out. This show is for you as much as it is for me. And if you're looking to connect between episodes, come join the Execs Who Run Strava group. It's a great place to log your runs, find a bit of accountability, and meet others who are figuring out life and leadership 1 mile at a time. If this episode sparked something for you, I would love if you could leave a comment, follow our podcast wherever you're listening, or send it to a friend who you think might find it interesting. Until the next one, get out there and get running.